Part 1. The ambushed Danny Porter checked the cargo manifest for the third time that morning. The numbers all matched, but something felt wrong. He couldn't explain it, just a feeling in his gut that made his shoulders tense. Around him, the cargo bay of the Horizon's Edge hummed with its usual sounds. Containers stacked 3 high lined the walls. The air smelled like recycled oxygen and machine oil. He was a security officer, though the title felt bigger than the job most days. The Horizon's Edge was a small trading vessel, not a military ship. It carried diplomats and supplies between worlds, keeping the peace through commerce rather than weapons. Danny had served on the ship for 2 years now, and most days were quiet. Boring even. He'd started to like boring. Across the bay, Zixthar worked on a power coupling. The Velix engineer looked like a walking crystal sculpture, all sharp angles and translucent edges that caught the light. Zixthar's people came from a high-gravity world where everything moved slowly and deliberately. They were patient, logical, and deeply kind. Danny had learned more about engineering from Zixthar than he'd ever learned in training. Near the navigation console, Kriva clicked through star charts with her 4 arms. The craft navigator resembled a praying mantis if a praying mantis stood 7 feet tall and wore a uniform. Her species communicated partly through body language, and right now her antennae were relaxed. Everything was normal for her. Danny wished he could feel the same. The ship was 3 days into a supply run through the outer terminus sector. It was a quiet region, mostly empty space between established colonies. Pirates occasionally prowled these areas, but the Horizon's Edge had never had trouble before. They flew under diplomatic flags and carried nothing worth stealing. Medical supplies, seeds, water purification tablets. Necessities, not treasures. Danny walked to the viewport and looked out at the stars. Space always looked peaceful from inside a ship, black and endless, dotted with distant lights. He'd grown up on Earth, in a city where you couldn't see stars through the light pollution. Out here, he could see everything. It should have made him feel small, but instead it made him feel connected to something larger. His radio crackled. "Danny, you reading anything weird on the sensors?" It was Greg Foster, one of the other human technicians. Greg worked up on the bridge monitoring systems. Danny frowned. "Define weird. Got a blip about 200,000 kilometers out. Could be debris, could be nothing. Just wanted to check if you were seeing anything down there." Before Danny could answer, the ship lurched sideways. Alarms screamed through every corridor. Red emergency lights flooded the cargo bay, turning everything the color of blood. Danny grabbed onto a support beam as the ship shook again. Shields failing. Greg's voice came through the radio, high with panic. "We're under attack! Multiple contacts, they're fast." Danny's training kicked in before his mind caught up. He ran to the weapons locker and slammed his hand on the scanner. The door hissed open, revealing rifles, body armor, and emergency equipment. He grabbed a rifle and a vest, throwing the vest on as he moved. Zixthar had frozen in place, their crystalline body rigid with fear. The Velix didn't have warriors. Their culture had never developed war. Facing violence went against everything in their nature. "Zix with me. Now," Danny shouted. He grabbed the engineer's arm, pulling them toward the rear exit. Kriva was already moving, her species' natural speed carrying her toward the emergency stations. The ship shook again. Something exploded above them, sending a rain of sparks down from the ceiling. Danny heard the sound he'd been dreading, the screech of metal being cut, the hiss of boarding airlocks latching onto the hull. "They're coming through the starboard side." Kriva's voice was a series of rapid clicks. "Multiple entry points." Danny positioned himself behind a container, rifle raised. Zixthar crouched behind him, trembling. Kriva took position on the other side of the bay, holding a small plasma cutter like a weapon. It wasn't much, but it was something. The first raiders came through fast. They were Skrell, a species Danny recognized from security briefings. They stood on 2 legs like humans, but that's where the similarity ended. Gray skin, too many teeth, eyes that saw in spectrums humans couldn't. They wore armor made from scavenged ship parts and carried weapons that hummed with lethal energy. Danny fired. His first shot caught a Skrell in the chest, dropping it. His second shot missed as the raiders scattered, taking cover behind cargo containers. They were good, trained. This wasn't random piracy, this was a coordinated attack. More Skrell poured through the breach. 8, 10, 12 of them, too many. Danny kept firing, keeping them back from Zixthar and Kriva. He could hear similar sounds of fighting throughout the ship. The crew was trying to resist, but they weren't soldiers. They were scientists, engineers, diplomats. One of the Skrull raised a weapon Danny didn't recognize. It looked like a rifle, but with a wider barrel and strange resonating chambers along the side. The raider aimed it at Danny and fired. The sound hit him like a wall. Not a bullet, not an energy beam. Pure sonic force that traveled through the air and slammed into his body. Danny felt his ribs crack, the bones snapping like dry twigs. The pain was immediate and overwhelming, white-hot agony that stole his breath. He stumbled backward, trying to stay on his feet. The Skrull fired again. This time Danny felt his left arm break, the bone shattering somewhere between his elbow and wrist. He dropped his rifle, crying out in pain. "Danny!" Zixthar reached for him, but Danny shoved the engineer away. "Run! Get to medical bay, seal the doors." Danny gasped the words through gritted teeth. Blood filled his mouth. Something had broken inside his chest. Kriva grabbed Zixthar and pulled. The two aliens ran for the rear exit as Danny tried to cover them. He picked up his rifle with his right hand, his left arm hanging useless at his side. He fired one-handed, the recoil nearly knocking him down. The Skrull advanced. Another sonic blast hit Danny's legs. He felt his right femur snap, felt the bone break apart inside his thigh. His leg buckled and he went down hard, slamming into the deck. His vision went white with pain. Through the haze, Danny saw the Skrull walk past him. They were heading after Zixthar and Kriva, ignoring him like he was already dead. Maybe he should have been. His body was broken, his mind screaming at him to shut down, to give in to the pain and darkness. But Danny could still hear sounds of fighting. Could still hear screams from other parts of the ship. His crew, his friends, people who depended on him. He watched the Skrull disappear down the corridor. Counted to 10. Then, teeth clenched so hard he thought they might crack, Danny started to crawl. His right arm pulled him forward. His legs dragged behind him, one of them bent at a wrong angle. Every movement sent fresh waves of agony through his body. His broken ribs ground against each other. His shattered arm bumped against the deck, making him want to scream. He didn't scream. He couldn't afford to. The Skrull might hear. The armory was 40 meters away. 40 meters across open deck with a body that didn't work anymore. Danny pulled himself forward 1 meter at a time. His vision kept going dark at the edges. Shock, probably. Blood loss. His body trying to protect itself by shutting down. He wouldn't let it. 20 meters. His hand slipped in his own blood, nearly sending him sprawling. He caught himself, kept moving. 15 meters. He could see the armory door now. Could see the access panel glowing green. 10 meters. His right leg was leaving a trail of blood behind him. Something was very wrong internally. He tried not to think about it. 5 meters. He reached up with his good hand, grabbed the edge of a container, pulled himself forward. The pain was so constant now that it almost felt normal. Almost the armory door. Danny lifted his hand to the scanner. It beeped, analyzing his fingerprints. For a horrible moment he thought it might not recognize him. His hand was covered in blood, shaking badly. Then the door hissed open. Danny pulled himself inside. The armory was small, lined with weapons and equipment. He reached up, grabbed the edge of a shelf, hauled himself into a sitting position. His broken leg screamed in protest. He ignored it. First priority, stop the bleeding. Danny found a medical kit, tore it open with his teeth, and jabbed an emergency coagulant injector into his thigh. The drug burned going in, but within seconds he could feel it working, his blood thickening, clotting faster. Second priority, mobility. He couldn't walk, but he could move. Danny found a magnetic equipment harness used for zero-gravity work. He strapped it around his chest, ignoring the agony from his broken ribs, and attached it to a hover cart used for moving heavy equipment. It wouldn't let him walk, but he could pull himself along and the cart would follow. Third priority, weapons. Danny loaded himself up with everything he could carry. Pistols, grenades, a combat knife. He found a stimulant injector meant for emergency situations. The warning label said not to use it with existing injuries. Danny jabbed it into his neck anyway. The drug hit his system like lightning. His vision cleared. The pain didn't go away, but suddenly he could think through it, could function. His hands stopped shaking. His mind sharpened. Danny pulled himself out of the armory. The hover cart followed, loaded with weapons and supplies. He could hear the Skrull moving through the ship above him. Could hear his crew's screams. Part 2. The impossible movement. The medical bay's door sealed with a heavy clank. Inside, 6 survivors caught their breath and tried to process what was happening. Sixthar's crystalline body still trembled from the run. Kriva stood by the door, her 4 arms holding improvised weapons, surgical tools that could cut or stab if needed. Lily Hayes sat at the medical console, her botanist training useless in this situation, but her human pragmatism keeping her focused. She pulled up the ship's internal sensors, trying to understand what was happening throughout the vessel. Beside her, Charnel, a Valix diplomat, watched with wide, frightened eyes. Greg Foster paced near the supply cabinets, checking what could be used as weapons or defenses. The sensors painted a grim picture. Red markers showed Skrell raiders throughout the ship. They were everywhere: the bridge, engineering, crew quarters. The ship's crew was either captured or hiding. The diplomatic mission was over. This was survival now. Lily's hands moved across the console, bringing up different views. Then she stopped, her breath catching in her throat. "That's impossible," she whispered. Kriva moved to her side, antennae twitching. "What is impossible?" Lily pointed at a heat signature on the lower deck. A single marker moving slowly through the corridors. The identity marker read, "Porter Danny, security officer." "He's moving," Lily said. "Danny's still moving." Sixthar approached the console, their crystal form clicking softly as they walked. "Perhaps the sensors are damaged. We saw him fall. We saw the sonic weapons hit him." Greg leaned over Lily's shoulder. "Pull up his medical readings from the cargo bay. The emergency system should have scanned everyone during the attack." Lily's fingers flew across the controls. A moment later, a medical readout appeared on screen. Everyone in the room went silent. The scan showed Danny's skeleton in detail. Red markers highlighted the damage. 17 distinct fractures. 3 ribs on the left side broken clean through. 2 ribs on the right side cracked. Left radius and ulna both fractured. Right femur broken with displacement. 3 vertebrae in his lower back cracked. Multiple stress fractures in his right hand. Significant internal bleeding in his chest cavity. "This reading must be wrong," Charnel said. The Velix diplomat's voice was steady, logical. No being could move with these injuries. The pain alone would render consciousness impossible. But the heat signature on the screen kept moving. Slowly, painfully, but deliberately moving toward the ship's armory section. Kriva's antennae straightened in alarm. His pain receptors should have overwhelmed his nervous system. "My people would die from shock with half these injuries. Mine would crystallize in self-preservation," Zixthar added. "The body would shut down all non-essential functions. Movement would be impossible." Lily stared at the screen. She was human like Danny, but she'd never been in a situation like this. She'd studied Earth biology, knew the theory of adrenaline and shock response, but seeing it in practice was different. Humans can push through pain when we have to. Our bodies produce chemicals that let us ignore injuries for short periods. Adrenaline, endorphins, cortisol. It's a survival mechanism. "For short periods, you said." Greg's voice was tight. "How short?" "Minutes. Maybe an hour in extreme cases." Lily watched Danny's marker reach the armory. "Not this long. Not with these injuries. He should have passed out by now." They watched the screen in silence. Danny's marker stayed in the armory for several minutes. Then it emerged and started moving again. This time he was moving slightly faster. "Still slow, still dragging, but with more purpose. He's armed now," Greg said. "Look at his equipment signature. He's carrying weapons." Charnel's eyes widened. "He intends to fight?" "In his condition?" Kriva made a clicking sound that her species used for confusion. "This is not logical. He cannot fight. His body is destroyed." But Danny's marker kept moving through the ship's lower levels. They watched as he entered a service corridor, one that ran parallel to the main hallways. He was using the maintenance passages, the spaces most raiders wouldn't think to check. Lily pulled up another view, a corridor near the engine room where 2 Skrell guards stood watch. She split the screen, showing both Danny's approach through the service tunnel and the raiders' position. "He's hunting them," Greg said, his voice a mix of disbelief and awe. "That's insane," Lily replied. "He can barely move. How is he planning to fight?" They got their answer minutes later. Danny's marker appeared in a ventilation shaft directly above the 2 raiders. The shaft's access panel opened, and through the sensor readings they saw what happened next. Mass dropped from above. Danny's body, falling onto the first raider. The impact took them both down. Thermal signatures showed a brief, brutal struggle. Danny's broken body wrestling with the healthier raider. It should have been an easy fight for the Skrell. It wasn't. Within 30 seconds, both Raiders' life signs went flat. Danny's marker remained stationary for nearly a minute. Then it started moving again, dragging toward the engine room's auxiliary entrance. He killed them both, Zixthar said. The engineer's voice held something humans would call horror. With 17 broken bones, he killed 2 armed raiders. Charnel approached the console, studying the readings. How much pain is he experiencing? Can you calculate it? Lily ran the numbers through the medical database. The computer compared Danny's injuries against pain scales used across multiple species. The result made her stomach turn. The computer estimates his current pain level at 9.4 out of 10. That's constant screaming level agony, every moment. And he's fighting through it, Greg said. Moving, thinking, hunting. Kriva's antennae drooped in what her species expressed as deep concern. This is not normal human behavior. I have served with your species for 3 years. I have seen humans injured before. They seek medical care. They rest, they heal. They do not. This. Lily pulled up Danny's personnel file, scanning through his background. He was military before joining the ship. Marines, Special Forces training. Maybe that makes a difference. Training does not change biology, Charnel argued. Training cannot eliminate pain receptors or mend broken bones. What we are witnessing defies medical science as I understand it. Greg pointed at the screen. Well, we better start understanding it because he's moving again. Heading toward the crew quarters where the Skrell are holding prisoners. They watched Danny's marker navigate through the ship's hidden spaces, maintenance tunnels, crawl spaces, areas designed for repairs and emergency access. He moved like he knew exactly where he was going, like he had memorized every meter of the ship's layout. Another group of Skrell appeared on the sensors, 4 of them, moving through a main corridor. Danny's marker shifted, positioning himself above them in another ventilation shaft. Lily found herself holding her breath, unable to look away. This time, Danny didn't drop on them. Instead, something fell from the shaft, a small object. Lily checked the signature. A flashbang grenade. The explosion registered on the sensors as a burst of light and sound. The 4 Skrell raiders stumbled, disoriented. Danny dropped through the shaft then, landing badly. His already broken leg gave out and he fell. The sensors showed him on the ground, the raiders recovering, turning toward him. He's done, Kriva whispered. There are 4 of them. But Danny rolled faster than someone with his injuries should be able to move. His thermal signature showed him pulling a weapon, firing. 1 raider dropped. 2. The 3rd raider reached Danny, tried to grab him. What happened next made everyone in the medical bay flinch. The thermal reading showed Danny grab the raider's arm with his one working hand and pull, using the raider's own momentum to throw them into the 4th attacker. Both raiders went down in a tangle. Danny's signature moved, a stabbing motion. Again, then stillness. 4 more raiders dead. Danny's marker remained motionless for 2 full minutes. Lily checked his vital signs, afraid he'd finally collapsed, that his body had finally given out. But no. After 2 minutes, he started moving again. Slower this time, dragging himself forward, but still moving. What drives him? Zixthar asked. What makes a human continue when their body is broken? When pain should force surrender? Lily didn't have a good answer. She thought about Earth, about humanity's history. Humans had survived ice ages, plagues, wars. They'd climbed mountains that tried to kill them. They'd sailed across oceans with primitive technology. They'd stubbornly refused to quit in situations where quitting made more sense. We're stubborn, she finally said. Maybe that's all it is. We don't know when to stop. Greg checked the sensor readings again. The Skrell are noticing. Look at their movement patterns. They're pulling back from their forward positions. They're starting to group together. He was right. The raider parties throughout the ship were consolidating, moving in larger groups. They were responding to a threat, even if they didn't fully understand what that threat was. Charnel studied the patterns. They are afraid. The Skrell do not fear easily. They are apex predators on their world, but they fear something on this ship now. They fear Danny, Kriva said. They fear the human who will not stop. On the screen, Danny's marker continued its slow, determined path through the ship's hidden spaces. Hunting. Always hunting. His body was broken, his pain constant and overwhelming. But his purpose remained clear. Part 3, the hunt begins. Danny Porter knew he was dying. That was a fact, simple and clear. His body was sending him constant messages about it. Pain from his chest where broken ribs shifted with every breath. Numbness in his left arm where the bones had shattered. A grinding, awful sensation from his right leg where the femur had snapped. Blood loss making his thoughts swim and his vision blur at the edges. But dying took time, and in that time he could still fight. He pulled himself through the maintenance tunnel, his good arm doing most of the work. The hover cart followed behind him, loaded with weapons and supplies. The tunnel was narrow, meant for repair drones more than people, but Danny fit if he stayed low. His broken leg dragged behind him useless. He'd tried to splint it with metal strips from the armory, but every movement sent fresh agony shooting up his spine. The stimulant he'd injected was helping. It sharpened his mind, pushed back the fog of shock. It also meant he felt everything. Every broken bone, every torn muscle, every damaged nerve. The trade-off was worth it. He needed to think clearly more than he needed to feel less pain. Through the tunnel's access grates, Danny could see into the corridor above. Skrull raiders moved in groups now, more cautious than before. They'd learned he was still active. Good. Caution made them slower, more predictable. Danny checked his tactical display, a small wrist-mounted computer that showed the ship's layout. Red markers indicated Skrull positions based on sound and movement sensors. Blue markers showed his crew, most of them gathered in the medical bay or held prisoner on the bridge. He couldn't save everyone, but he could make the raiders' job harder. He could buy time for a rescue signal to reach someone who could help. His radio crackled softly. Lily's voice came through, barely a whisper. Danny, if you can hear this, 10 raiders are converging on your position. They know you're in the maintenance tunnels. You need to fall back. Danny couldn't respond. Talking would give away his exact position, but he had no intention of falling back. 10 raiders meant 10 enemies who weren't guarding prisoners or securing the ship. 10 enemies who were focused on him. He reached into his equipment harness and pulled out 3 small mines. Magnetic adhesive, motion-triggered with a 3-second delay. Danny had 15 seconds before the raiders would be in position. He worked fast. Mine 1 went on the tunnel floor 10 meters back. Mine 2 on the side wall 5 meters back. Mine 3 directly under an access grate that looked into the corridor above. Danny set the triggers, then pulled himself forward as fast as his broken body would allow. Behind him, he heard the Skrull entering the tunnel. Their footsteps were heavy, confident. They thought they had him trapped. The first mine detonated with a sharp crack. The explosion in the enclosed tunnel was deafening. Shrapnel and force channeled forward and back. Danny heard screaming. The second mine went off 3 seconds later. More screaming, and now smoke filled the tunnel, thick and black. The third mine exploded upward through the access grate, catching the raiders in the corridor above. The shaped charge blew a hole through the deck plating, sending metal fragments and fire into their ranks. Danny didn't wait to count casualties. He pulled himself through a side junction in the tunnel, taking a path that led toward the ship's water recycling system. Behind him, the Skrull were shouting in their language, a series of clicks and hisses that his translator couldn't process through all the noise and interference. His tactical display updated. 3 raiders down from the mines, 7 still active, but now more spread out, more cautious. That was fine. Danny wasn't trying to win a straight fight. He was trying to make them pay for every meter of ship they took. The water recycling system was a large room filled with tanks and pipes. Danny knew it well. He'd helped repair a leak here 6 months ago. He pulled himself to a control panel and accessed the system. With a few keystrokes, he overrode the safety protocols. Water pressure in a ship's system was carefully controlled. Too high and pipes could burst. Too low and the recycling process failed. Danny set the pressure to maximum and locked the controls. Then he opened the emergency vents, sending a spray of water into the corridors around the recycling room. The water itself wasn't dangerous. But water and electricity were a bad combination. And the Skrull raiders were all wearing electronic equipment, sensors, communicators, powered armor. Danny pulled out a small EMP device, set it to maximum radius, and threw it into the water-filled corridor. The pulse fried every electronic device within 50 meters. Including, Danny realized too late, his own tactical display. The screen on his wrist went dark. He'd just blinded himself to the ship's sensor network. It was worth it. Through the wall he heard shouting and confusion. The Skrull had lost their communication and coordination. They were operating blind now, same as him. Danny moved again, pulling himself through a pipe-access tunnel. This one was even smaller, meant for inspection drones. His shoulders scraped the sides. His broken ribs ground together. He bit down on a piece of leather from his equipment harness to keep from screaming. The tunnel opened into the ship's storage bay, a massive room filled with supply crates stacked 3 high. Danny pulled himself onto a catwalk that ran along the upper wall. From here, he could see the entire bay, and he could see the 5 Skrull raiders who'd entered below, searching for him. They moved carefully, weapons raised, checking behind every crate. They were learning. They didn't underestimate the broken human anymore. Danny checked his weapons. 1 rifle, half-charged, 2 pistols, both with fresh power cells, 4 grenades, a combat knife. Not enough for a direct fight, but enough for what he had in mind. He pulled out his first grenade, an incendiary. The storage bay was filled with non-flammable supplies, mostly food and water, but the crates themselves were made of a composite material that would burn if you got it hot enough. Danny set the grenade for a 10-second delay and dropped it behind the raiders. They heard it hit the deck, turned, saw the grenade. One of them shouted a warning. They scattered, diving behind crates. The grenade exploded, spraying burning chemical across the deck. The composite crates caught fire immediately, sending up thick black smoke. The storage bay's fire suppression system activated, spraying foam from ceiling-mounted nozzles. In the chaos of fire and foam and smoke, Danny moved. He dragged himself along the catwalk to a new position, ignoring the pain, ignoring the way his vision was starting to tunnel. He found another access hatch, dropped through it, and landed in a corridor 1 level down. His broken leg hit first. The pain was so intense that his vision went completely white for several seconds. When it cleared, he was lying on the deck, gasping, tears streaming down his face. His body was begging him to stop, to just lie still and let the darkness take him. Danny forced himself to move. He grabbed a pipe on the wall, pulled himself upright, and started dragging himself down the corridor. Behind him, he could hear the Skrull in the storage bay, still dealing with the fire and smoke. His radio crackled again. Greg's voice this time. "Danny, I don't know if you can hear this, but the Skrull commander is moving toward your last known position with 20 raiders. They're hunting you seriously now. You need to hide. 20 raiders." Danny almost laughed. His body was broken, his weapons running low, and his vision kept going dark at the edges. 20 raiders should be an impossible challenge. Should be. Danny pulled himself into a crew cabin, one that had been empty when the attack started. He sealed the door and moved to the desk, pulling up the room's computer terminal. His security code still worked. He accessed the ship's internal sensors, pulling up a view of the ship's layout. The Skrull commander was easy to spot, bigger than the others, surrounded by elite guards. They were moving through the ship methodically, checking every room, every corridor, looking for him. Danny studied the route they were taking. Predictable, military. They were clearing rooms one at a time, maintaining formation. Professional, that was their weakness. Professionals followed patterns, and patterns could be exploited. Danny accessed the ship's environmental controls. Every room had independent climate settings, temperature, humidity, air pressure. He started adjusting settings in rooms ahead of the commander's path, dropping temperature to freezing in some, raising it to sweltering in others, creating pockets of thin air and thick air. The Skrull were reptilian, cold-blooded. Temperature changes affected them more than they would affect a human. They'd be uncomfortable, distracted. Not much, but enough. Next, Danny accessed the lighting controls. He set every light ahead of the commander's path to flicker randomly. Not enough to plunge rooms into darkness, that would make them more cautious. Just enough to be annoying, to make their eyes work harder, to tire them out. Finally, he accessed the ship's audio system. In rooms scattered throughout the commander's route, he activated speakers at low volume. Random sounds, footsteps, doors opening, voices whispering. The sounds were quiet enough that the raiders might think they were imagining them, but loud enough to keep them on edge. Death by 1,000 cuts. Danny couldn't beat 20 raiders in a straight fight, but he could make them tired, uncomfortable, paranoid. He could make them make mistakes. He watched the commander's group on the sensors. They were slowing down, taking more time to clear each room. The temperature changes. Part 4. The stand at Medical Bay. In the medical bay, 6 survivors listened to the sounds of their ship dying. Through the walls, they could hear explosions, weapons fire, the screech of metal being torn apart. And underneath it all, the quiet, steady movement of one human who refused to stop. Lily Hayes checked the sensors for the 20th time in 10 minutes. Danny's life signs were getting weaker. His heart rate was erratic, blood pressure dropping. The medical computer kept flagging his readings with warnings. Critical condition, immediate medical intervention required. Survival chance decreasing. But he kept moving. "He's in the lower engineering deck now," Lily said. Her voice was quiet, awed. "He's setting up something near the auxiliary control station." Zixthar stood beside her, watching the display. The crystalline engineer had stopped trembling hours ago, replaced by a strange calm. "That station controls the emergency systems. Blast doors, atmospheric vents, power distribution. If he can access those controls, he can turn the whole ship into a weapon," Greg finished. The human technician had been pacing, but now he stood still, watching the screen with intense focus. "He's going to make them pay for every meter they've taken." Kriva's antennae twitched. The Skrull commander is moving toward his position, with 15 raiders. They know where he is. On the sensor display, the red markers converged on Danny's blue marker. It looked like a closing fist surrounding one tiny point of resistance. Everyone in the medical bay held their breath. Then the ship shuddered. Not from an explosion, but from something more fundamental. The life support system cycled down, and the atmospheric pressure started to drop. Not fast enough to be dangerous, but enough to be noticeable, enough to make breathing harder. "He's venting air from their section," Zixthar said, slowly, making them uncomfortable. Lily pulled up another view, and he's locked the blast doors behind them. They can't retreat. They either have to go forward and face him, or cut through 3 inches of reinforced steel to get back. Charnel, who had been quiet for most of the crisis, finally spoke. The Valix diplomat's voice was thoughtful. "He is giving them a choice. Advance into danger or retreat in shame. For a warrior species like the Skrull, there's only one choice they can make." "He's counting on that," Greg said. "He knows how they think. He's turning their own nature against them." The raiders advanced toward the auxiliary control station. Through the sensors, the survivors could track every step. The Skrull moved carefully, weapons raised, checking every corner. They'd learned to respect the broken human. Danny's marker remained stationary at the control station. Lily zoomed in, trying to understand what he was doing. "He's not moving. He's just waiting there." "Perhaps he cannot move anymore," Kriva suggested. "Perhaps his body has finally failed." But even as she spoke, something happened. The corridor leading to the control station suddenly sealed with blast doors at both ends. The 15 Skrull raiders were trapped in a 50-meter stretch of hallway with nowhere to go. And then the atmospheric vent opened. "Oh no," Lily whispered. "He's venting the entire corridor to space." They watched the pressure readings drop rapidly. The air rushed out of the sealed corridor in seconds, creating a vacuum. The Skrull raiders scrambled for emergency masks, for anything to help them breathe. They had maybe 30 seconds before they'd pass out. 20 seconds before they'd be dead. The blast door at the far end opened. Not completely, just enough to let air rush back in to give the raiders a chance to breathe, a chance to live, but it stayed open for only 5 seconds. Then it sealed again. The venting resumed. "He's playing with them," Greg said. His voice held a mix of horror and admiration. "He's showing them he could kill them all right now, but he's choosing not to. He's making them afraid." Zixthar's crystalline body reflected the emergency lights. "This is psychological warfare. Very human. Very effective." The pattern repeated 3 more times. Vent the air, let them panic, give them air, vent again. Each time, the Skrull raiders became more desperate. Some tried to cut through the blast doors. Others fired their weapons at the walls, trying to create an escape route. Nothing worked. Finally, the blast door near the control station opened. The raiders rushed through, desperate for air, for escape, for anything but that sealed corridor. Danny was waiting. The sensors showed the fight in thermal signatures and movement patterns. It was brief and brutal. Danny couldn't move well, his leg was broken, his arm useless. But he'd positioned himself perfectly. He'd created a choke point where the raiders had to come at him 1 or 2 at a time. And he'd armed the corridor with every trap he could build from engineering supplies. Electrified deck plates. Explosive charges hidden in the walls. Welding lasers reprogrammed to fire automatically. The first 3 raiders died in the opening seconds, caught by traps they never saw. The rest tried to retreat, but Danny had sealed the blast door behind them. They were trapped between his position and the corridor they'd just escaped. It took 4 minutes. When it was over, 14 raiders were dead. One had managed to crawl back into the vented corridor, choosing possible death by suffocation over certain death by the human. Danny's marker remained at the control station, motionless. His life signs were critical. Heart rate barely registering. Blood pressure at dangerous lows. He's done, Lily said. That was everything he had left. He can't fight anymore. But then Danny's marker moved. Slowly, painfully, but moving. He was pulling himself toward the engineering core, dragging his broken body forward 1 meter at a time. Why? Kriva asked. Why does he continue? His body should have shut down long ago. The pain, the blood loss, the injuries. Any reasonable being would have stopped. Greg pulled up Danny's personnel file again, scanning through his military record. I found something. A psychologist's evaluation from his special forces training. It says, subject demonstrates extreme resistance to negative reinforcement. Traditional pain compliance techniques are ineffective. Subject appears capable of dissociating from physical discomfort and focusing entirely on mission objectives. Translation? Charnel asked. He can ignore pain, not just push through it, actually ignore it. His brain can decide that pain doesn't matter and just focus on what needs to be done. Lily shook her head. That's not normal, even for humans. That's something else. They watched Danny reach the engineering core. The reactor that powered the ship stood before him. A massive cylinder of contained energy. Danny pulled himself to the main control panel and started working. What is he doing? Zixthar leaned closer to the screen. Lily ran through the commands Danny was entering. Her eyes widened. He's overriding the reactor safety protocols. He's threatening to overload the core. Greg pulled up a communication panel. I'm getting a ship-wide broadcast. It's from Danny. He activated the speakers. Danny's voice filled the medical bay. It was rough, slurred with pain and exhaustion, but the words were clear. Skrell Raiders. This is Security Officer Danny Porter. I have control of the ship's reactor core. I have disabled all safety systems. If I do not input a code every 5 minutes, the core will overload and destroy this ship. You have 2 choices. Abandon the ship immediately or die when the reactor goes critical. You have 10 minutes to decide. The clock is ticking. Silence followed the announcement. Then through the ship's sensors they saw the Skrell markers start moving. All of them. Heading toward the boarding airlocks. Heading toward escape. They're leaving, Kriva said, disbelief in her voice. They're actually leaving. He's bluffing, Charnel said. He would not actually destroy the ship. That would kill everyone aboard, including us. Greg shook his head. The Skrell don't know that. They don't understand humans well enough to know what we will or won't do. And after everything Danny's done today, after watching him fight with 17 broken bones, after seeing him refuse to die when he should be dead 10 times over, they believe him. Lily watched the sensors. The commander is trying to rally his troops. He's ordering them to advance on engineering, to stop Danny. But the raiders weren't listening. They were running for their ships, abandoning their posts, leaving their captured prisoners. Fear had broken their discipline. Fear of the human who wouldn't stop, who couldn't be killed, who had just threatened to blow up the entire ship. They're afraid, Zixthar said. A warrior species that raids ships for profit is afraid of one broken human. Because he showed them something they didn't understand, Greg said. He showed them that humans don't quit. That we can't be stopped by pain or fear or injury. That we'll drag ourselves forward on broken legs and shattered bones and keep fighting until we physically can't anymore. The last Skrell Raider left the ship. Their vessels detached and accelerated away, leaving the horizon's edge adrift and damaged but free. Lily stood up. We need to get to Danny, now. His life signs are failing. If we don't get him medical attention immediately, he'll die. They moved as a group, breaking out of the medical bay and racing through the ship's corridors. They found crew members emerging from hiding spots, confused but alive. They found prisoners freed from the bridge, grateful and shaken. And they found Danny in the engineering core, collapsed at the base of the reactor control panel. His face was gray. Blood pooled beneath him. His breathing was so shallow it was almost invisible. Part 5. The Skrell commander's realization. Vascaril stood on the bridge of his raider ship, the Devourer's Claw, and stared at the receding image of the horizon's edge. Around him, his crew worked in silence, too afraid to meet his eyes. They should have been celebrating. They'd escaped with their lives. But escape from a disabled trading vessel felt less like victory and more like defeat. The commander was a veteran of 40 raids. He'd captured military escorts, overwhelmed merchant convoys, broken defensive positions that should have been unbreakable. His reputation in the outer terminus was legendary. Ships surrendered when they saw his vessel approaching, because resistance was futile. Until today. Vascaral's tactical officer approached cautiously. "Commander, the fleet is requesting your report on the Horizon's Edge situation. Tell them the ship was too heavily defended. The losses were unacceptable for the potential gain." Vascaral's voice was steady, controlled, a lie but a useful one. The tactical officer hesitated. "Sir, they're asking about the human. The reports from the boarding party, they're confused, contradictory. Fleet Command wants clarification." Vascaral turned to face his subordinate. The tactical officer was young, barely 3 cycles into raiding. He hadn't been on the Horizon's Edge, he hadn't seen what Vascaral had seen. "Bring me all medical scans of the human security officer. Every recording from our boarding team. I want everything." The tactical officer nodded and hurried away. Vascaral returned his attention to the view screen. The Horizon's Edge was just a dot now, growing smaller. They should have taken that ship easily. Small crew, minimal defenses, diplomatic flags that meant they wouldn't have military backup. Instead, they'd lost 37 warriors. To one human, the tactical officer returned with a data pad. "The scans and recordings, sir." Vascaral took the pad and moved to his private quarters. He needed to understand what had happened. Needed to know what went wrong so it could never happen again. He pulled up the first medical scan, taken during the initial assault. The scan showed the human, Danny Porter, according to the ship's manifest, in the cargo bay. The sonic weapon impacts were clearly visible. Vascaral counted the fractures highlighted in red. 17 major breaks, 3 cracked vertebrae, massive internal bleeding. By any standard, Vascaral understood the human should have been dead within minutes. The pain alone should have caused immediate shock, followed by system failure. The Skrell's own medical experts had reviewed these scans and confirmed it. Unsurvivable injuries. Yet there were subsequent scans taken throughout the raid. Each one showed the human still mobile, still fighting. The fractures were still there. Bones didn't heal in hours. But the human kept moving anyway. Vascaral pulled up the first recording from his boarding team. It showed 2 warriors on patrol near the engine room. They were relaxed, confident. The raid was going well. Then something dropped from above the human, falling from a ventilation shaft, landing on the first warrior with his full weight. The impact should have shattered what was left of his bones, but the human rolled with it, using momentum and surprise instead of strength. The fight was brief. The human couldn't stand properly. His right leg was clearly broken, but he fought from the ground. He grabbed the second warrior's weapon, turned it on its owner, used the warrior's own strength against him. Within seconds, both warriors were dead. The human remained motionless for a long moment. Even through the recording, Vascaral could see the trembling, the pain the human had to be experiencing. Then he started moving again, dragging himself away from the bodies. Vascaral watched recording after recording. Each one showed the same pattern. The human shouldn't be mobile, shouldn't be fighting, should have surrendered or died. But he kept going. In one recording, the human fell down a service ladder. The fall was at least 4 meters. He landed badly on his broken leg. The scream was audible through the recording, raw, agonized. The human lay there for nearly a minute, clearly in overwhelming pain. Then he grabbed a pipe on the wall, pulled himself upright, and continued moving. Vascaral paused the recording. He rewound it, watched it again, tried to understand what he was seeing. His species understood pain. Pain was nature's warning system, telling a body to stop before injury became permanent. Every intelligent species in the galaxy had pain receptors. Every species learned to listen to those warnings, except, apparently, humans. Vascaral called up the Skrell medical database and searched for information on human physiology. The entry was brief. Humans were a recent addition to the galactic community, and not much was known about them. What information existed was concerning. Humans came from a death world called Earth. High gravity, extreme temperature variations, aggressive predators, frequent natural disasters. The planet had tried to kill humanity for millions of years, and humanity had survived by becoming incredibly difficult to kill. The database mentioned something called the sympathetic nervous system. When humans faced extreme danger, their bodies flooded with chemicals that enhanced performance. Adrenaline increased heart rate and blood flow. Endorphins masked pain. Cortisol sharpened focus. In essence, human bodies could temporarily ignore their safety systems. They could push beyond normal limitations when survival demanded it. But the database said this response lasted minutes, maybe an hour at most. The human on the horizon's edge had fought for 4 hours with 17 broken bones. Baskerville pulled up another recording. This one showed the corridor where his warriors had been trapped and vented to space. The human's tactical thinking was visible in every detail. The sealed blast doors, the timed venting, the psychological torture of giving them air and taking it away repeatedly. This wasn't just a pain-resistant warrior. This was an intelligent strategist who used his environment as a weapon, who understood fear and how to create it. The final recording showed the engineering core, the human's threat to destroy the ship. Baskerville had heard the broadcast, had seen his warriors' reactions. They'd broken. Experienced raiders who'd fought 100 battles had fled in panic from one broken human. Baskerville had tried to rally them, had ordered them to advance to overwhelm the human through sheer numbers. But his warriors wouldn't listen. They'd seen too much. Seen a creature that couldn't be stopped by pain or injury, that kept fighting when any reasonable being would have surrendered. They believed the human would destroy the ship, believed he would kill everyone, including himself, rather than let the Skrull have it. And watching these recordings, Baskerville believed it too. He set down the datapad and looked at his hands. They were trembling slightly. Baskerville had commanded raiders for 20 years. He'd faced armed resistance, military vessels, desperate captains who fought to protect their ships. He'd won every time through superior numbers, better weapons, and ruthless efficiency. But he'd never faced anything like this human. A knock on his door. Baskerville composed himself. "Enter!" His second-in-command stepped inside. She was older than Baskerville, scarred from 100 battles, one of the most experienced warriors in the fleet. "Commander, we need to discuss the raid." "There's nothing to discuss. We escaped. That's what matters." She met his eyes. "The crew is talking. They're saying we ran from one injured human, that we abandoned a successful raid because of one enemy. One enemy who killed 37 of our warriors. One injured enemy. The medical scans show he should have been dead. The crew doesn't understand how we could retreat from someone who couldn't even walk properly." Baskerville stood. "Then the crew needs to review the recordings. They need to see what I saw, which is something that doesn't follow the rules we understand. Every species in the galaxy has limits. Pain thresholds, physical capabilities, survival instincts that tell them when to stop fighting and save themselves." Baskerville moved to the view screen, looking out at the stars. "Humans don't seem to have those limits. Or if they do, they can choose to ignore them." His second-in-command was quiet for a moment. "The fleet won't accept that explanation. They'll say we were cowards, that we ran from a wounded enemy. Then they can try raiding a human ship themselves. See how it goes." Baskerville turned to face her. "I'm putting out a fleet-wide advisory. All ships are to avoid human vessels unless absolutely certain they can be taken quickly and with overwhelming force. No extended battles. No close combat. No giving humans time to adapt and fight back. That's extreme. Commander, it's necessary." Baskerville pulled up the recording of the human falling down the ladder shaft, screaming in pain, then getting up and continuing. "Watch this. Tell me what you see." She watched in silence. When it ended, her expression was troubled. "I see something that should be dead but isn't." "Exactly. And if we don't warn the other fleets, they'll learn the same lesson we did, at the cost of many warriors." His second-in-command nodded slowly. "I'll prepare the advisory. What should we say about humans?" Baskerville thought about everything he'd seen. The broken body that kept moving. The tactical mind that turned a damaged ship into a fortress. The absolute refusal to surrender even when surrender was the only logical option. Say that humans are dangerous not because they're strong, but because they don't know when to quit. Say that injuring a human doesn't stop them. It just makes them more desperate. Say that a cornered human is the most dangerous thing you can face because they'll take you. Part 6, the counterattack. Danny woke to the sound of alarms. His vision was blurry, his thoughts moving through thick fog. For a moment he couldn't remember where he was or what had happened. Then the pain hit him like a wave and everything came rushing back. The raid. The broken bones. The fighting. He was still in the engineering core, lying on the deck where he'd collapsed. Someone had put a blanket over him, but he was alone. Through the walls he could hear movement, footsteps, voices speaking in the Skrell language. They'd come back. Danny tried to sit up. His body screamed in protest, but he forced himself upright, leaning against the reactor control panel. His broken leg was a mass of agony. His left arm hung useless. His ribs ground together with every breath. The stimulant he'd injected earlier had worn off, leaving him with the full weight of his injuries. His vision kept going dark at the edges. His hands trembled. Blood loss and shock were catching up with him, but the Skrell were back and his crew was still in danger. Danny pulled himself to the control panel and checked the ship's sensors. The readings confirmed his fear. 3 Skrell boarding parties had returned, entering through different airlocks. 24 raiders total, moving through the ship with clear purpose. They were heading for the medical bay where the survivors had taken shelter. Danny's threat about the reactor must have worked initially, scared them away. But now they'd regrouped, realized the human was dying or dead, and decided to try again. Take the ship and its crew before any rescue arrived. They'd made one mistake, though. They assumed Danny was finished. He checked his weapons. 1 pistol with half a charge remaining. 2 grenades, a knife. His rifle was empty, discarded somewhere during the fighting. Not much to work with, but it would have to be enough. Danny pulled up the ship's communication system and opened a channel to the medical bay. His voice came out rough, barely more than a whisper. "Lily, can you hear me?" Static, then her voice. "Danny, you're awake. Don't move, we're coming to get you. Your injuries, no time. Skrell are back. 24 of them heading your way." Silence on the other end. Then Greg's voice. "We saw them on sensors. We're trying to seal the section, but they'll cut through eventually." Danny closed his eyes, thinking through options. 24 raiders against 6 unarmed survivors in a medical bay with limited defenses. The math was simple and brutal. Without help, his crew would be captured or killed. "How long can you hold?" Danny asked. "Maybe 10 minutes before they breach the door, then..." Greg didn't finish the sentence. 10 minutes. Danny looked at his broken body, at the weapons he had left, at the distance between engineering and the medical bay. 50 meters through corridors that were probably being watched by Skrell patrols. Impossible odds. But he'd been facing impossible odds all day. "I'm coming to you," Danny said. "You can't. Your body, I'm coming. Be ready to open the medical bay door when I get there. And Lily, I need you to do something for me." He gave her instructions, specific and detailed. She argued, said it was too dangerous, but Danny cut her off. "Trust me, please," she agreed. The channel went silent. Danny took a deep breath, painful with his broken ribs, and started moving. He couldn't walk, so he crawled. Pulled himself forward with his good arm, dragged his broken body behind him. Every meter was agony. He made it to the corridor outside engineering. Empty for now, but he could hear Skrell voices echoing from nearby sections. They were spreading through the ship, searching for survivors. Danny moved into a service tunnel, one that ran parallel to the main corridor. Darker, tighter, harder to search. His broken body barely fit, but he squeezed through, leaving a trail of blood behind him. The tunnel opened near a supply closet. Danny pulled himself inside and checked his equipment. The 2 grenades he had were fragmentation types, deadly in close quarters, but not much use for what he was planning. He needed a distraction. Something big enough to draw the Skrell away from the medical bay. Danny pulled up the ship's schematic on his wrist computer. The device had been damaged by the earlier EMP blast, but basic functions still worked. He studied the layout, looking for options. The cargo bay, still filled with burning crates from his earlier fire, still hot, still unstable, and directly below the main corridor where half the Skrell raiders were positioned. If he could trigger the fire suppression system to fail, if he could introduce pure oxygen into that environment, the whole bay would go up like a bomb, big enough to blow through the deck above to send raiders scrambling to create chaos. But he'd need to get to the environmental controls, which meant crossing 2 open corridors with multiple Skrell patrols. Danny checked his pistol charge, maybe enough for 6 shots. Not enough for a firefight, but enough to get him through if he was careful. He started moving again, using maintenance tunnels and crawl spaces. His body was giving out. He could feel it shutting down piece by piece. His vision was getting narrower, his thoughts slower. Blood loss, organ damage. He was running on borrowed time. But he'd made it this far on borrowed time. Might as well borrow a little more. Danny reached the environmental control station. It was in a small room off the main engineering deck, protected by a locked door. He didn't have the energy to hack it, so he used his last door override code, one he'd saved for emergencies. The door opened. The room was empty. Danny pulled himself to the console and started working. First, he shut down the cargo bay fire suppression system. Then he opened the oxygen vents, flooding the bay with pure O2. The fire would feed on it, grow hotter, more volatile. He set a timer for 30 seconds and started moving again. Pulled himself out of the room, back into the corridor. He needed to be clear before the explosion hit. 20 seconds. He was 10 meters from the safe zone. His broken leg caught on something, sending fresh pain shooting through his body. He nearly blacked out but forced himself to stay conscious. 10 seconds. 5 meters. His arm was giving out, muscles screaming with fatigue. 5 seconds. He pulled himself around a corner behind a reinforced support beam. The cargo bay exploded. The blast was massive, far larger than Danny had expected. The deck above buckled and tore, sending debris and fire shooting up into the main corridor. Skrull raiders were thrown backward by the force. Some fell through the torn deck into the inferno below. Alarms screamed throughout the ship. Emergency systems activated, trying to contain the damage. And most importantly, the Skrull raiders all converged on the explosion site, abandoning their advance on the medical bay. Danny's radio crackled. "What the hell did you do?" Greg's voice, shocked. "Gave you an opening. Is the path clear?" Most of them diverted to the explosion, but there's still a group of 6 heading our way. They're almost at the medical bay door. 6 raiders. Danny checked his position. He was on the wrong side of the ship, too far away to intercept them directly. But there was another option. "Lily, is everything ready on your end?" Danny asked. "Ready. But Danny, this is insane. Insane is all I have left. Do it when I give the signal." Danny pulled himself toward the auxiliary power junction. It controlled electrical flow to major ship systems, including the medical bay's emergency containment field. Lily had been working on something while he moved, a modification to the field generator, turning it from a defensive system into a weapon. If it worked, if it didn't, his crew would die, and Danny's entire fight would be for nothing. He reached the power junction and connected his wrist computer. The interface was damaged, but he could still send basic commands. He pulled up the medical bay's power systems and waited. Through the ship's sensors, he watched the 6 Skrull raiders reach the medical bay door. They started cutting through with plasma torches, melting the reinforced metal. 30 seconds until breach. Now, Lily. Do it now. The medical bay's containment field activated, but instead of creating a defensive barrier, it surged outward. Lily had reversed the polarity, turned it into a massive electromagnetic pulse focused on the area directly outside the door. The pulse fried every electronic device the Skrull raiders carried. Their weapons died, their armor's-powered systems shut down, their communication equipment sparked and smoked, and before they could recover, the medical bay door opened. Greg and Lily charged out, wielding improvised weapons, surgical tools, heavy instruments, anything they could use. Behind them, even Zixthar and Kriva joined the fight, their peaceful natures overwhelmed by desperate determination. The 6 Skrull raiders, disoriented and disarmed, didn't stand a chance. The fight was brief and brutal. When it ended, 6 raiders lay on the deck and the survivors stood victorious. Danny watched through the sensors, feeling something like relief. His crew was safe. They'd fought back. They'd survived. His wrist computer beeped a warning. Life support was failing in multiple sections. The explosion in the cargo bay had damaged primary systems. The ship was dying, and so was he. Danny's vision was tunneling, darkness closing in from all sides. His heart was beating irregularly, skipping beats. He tried to move and found he couldn't. His body had finally given up, shut down completely. He heard footsteps approaching. Voices calling his name. Hands touching him, trying to help. Too late, probably. He'd pushed too far, broken too much, but his crew was alive. That's what mattered. Danny let the darkness take him, hoping it wasn't permanent, knowing it might be, accepting it either way. He'd done what he needed. Part 7. Aftermath and Understanding. 3 months later, Danny woke in a medical facility that smelled like antiseptic and recycled air. For a moment he panicked. Where was he? Where was his crew? Were they safe? Then he saw Lily sitting in a chair beside his bed, reading something on a data pad. She looked up and smiled. Welcome back. How long? His voice was rough from disuse. 3 months, 2 weeks, 4 days. You've been in a medically induced coma while your body healed. Lily set down her pad and moved closer. The rescue ship arrived 6 hours after you lost consciousness. They stabilized you and transferred you here, to the Galactic Medical Center on New Geneva. Danny tried to process that. 3 months. He'd been unconscious for 3 months. The crew? He asked. Everyone survived. Zixthar is back with their family. Kriva returned to her navigation post. Greg's working on a new ship. Charnel went back to diplomatic duties. Lily paused. We all come visit you once a week. Today's my day. The Skrell? Gone. After the explosion and the fight at the medical bay, the remaining raiders fled. They haven't been seen in the outer terminus since. Word got around about what happened, about you. Danny tried to sit up. Pain flared through his body. Duller than before. Manageable, but still present. Lily helped him adjust the